Growing up on the reservation, I was raised by my mom. My father was never around. Still to this day, I don't know my father. Turned out my father was white. You know, obviously on the reservation, I knew I was Native, but once I found out about this other side of me, it was kind of like, you know, who am I? What am I? Like, you know, I always thought I was Native, but then obviously I'm light complected, and so identity is something I still even deal with today. Having an absent father and somebody who was not in my life ever didn't want anything to do with me, so I didn't want anything to do with him or who he was. Being white was that. I wanted nothing to do with being white. I just knew I was a kid from the res and I was Native. When I travel to different communities, you know, I always get, you know, people asking me like, are you Native? Like, are you Indian? You know, and I just kind of overhear people talking, you know, like he's not Native, and like just saying hurtful things about who I am and my identity. It's just always one of those things that I often fight with, but I know who I am, and I'm comfortable in my own skin, even though it's not a dark shade like most kids that I work with. For me, I know who I am. I know that I'm Native. I know that I'm Ojibwe. I know who I am.
Dear Native youth, I wrote this song for you, cause I wanted you to know that I put my heart into. I get inspired every time that I speak to you. I can acknowledge all the things that you're going through, and trust me when I say that I've been in your shoes.
I remember when I wrote the lyrics, just a lot of reminiscent for me and kind of going back to what I was going through growing up on the reservation, and it was an emotional thing for me. Even capturing the video itself, I went to this desolate location, and that location I wanted to capture feeling abandoned, you know, and how our youth sometimes feel like they're abandoned. Well, I knew that story because I felt like that in some cases. I've gotten messages from kids who are really struggling and who are talking about doing harm to themselves, and the track Dear Native Youth has helped them get through those rough times.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
Up, I want so high, where you might put in star.
Hey, Portland. So I can't pick between these two album covers. Which one would you want me to use for my album cover? Which one do you like the best? You want that one?
Mm-hmm.
That one right there?
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I gotta get that. I got this one.
Yeah, can you show which album cover you wanted? The song I wrote for my daughter, Portland. For the first year, I was a stay-at-home dad and I took care of her. I never had my dad read me a story and put me to bed. You know, that uncovers the heartbreak, but it also uncovers the role that I have accepted and the role that I'm glad to take on. That role is not just being a father, but being the best father that I could be to her. Not being a good father because I had a terrible father, but being a father just because that's my role as an Indigenous man. I was raised by women. Now I get to raise my own little woman, you know, like that to me is like super amazing. So the writing helps me process that in the best way that I can.
You'd have cried till you seen the birth of your child. When I held you in my arms for that very first time, I remember at that point that I was feeling so alive. I know it's hard to describe.
I drove here last night, and I always have a hard time because I have a 2.5-year-old little girl named Portland, and she's so special to me. And I always have a hard time leaving her. So I woke up this morning feeling pretty sad because I miss her so much. So I want you guys to know that you guys are loved and appreciated, because you'll know when you become older and you have kids yourself, which is not for a long ways down. And I'm crying not because I'm sad anymore. I'm crying because I'm happy. I'm really happy because you guys give me life. When it comes to hip hop, it's not just about the music, it's about everything that's involved in it, which is art. Art, creating something, getting all the negativity that surrounds us, get it out of there and create something that helps us overcome those things that are happening in our life, those hard situations.
But they erased our history and made history up. Growing up kind of having that hole inside of me, not knowing who I was as a Native person, you know, like that lack of culture and Native identity and language. I kind of wanted to make the song about helping not just Native people, but all people to find themselves, find their identity, find who they really are spiritually and as human beings, you know.
I feel the latent effects of assimilation in a city native raised by bright light skyscrapers, born with dim prospects, little peace in living as a child.
So I had this idea like, man, I want to preserve this language by bringing it to hip hop. Hip hop is something that a lot of kids care about, and if I put the two together, it might make the language more interesting to kids.
Yeah, I used to feel like I wasn't truly indigenous. Now I say me which get your money due for showing me my true roots. Definitely native. Take responsibility for being educated.
And the prayer itself is like a prayer of Creator, help us to find ourselves, help us to find our ways so that we can live healthy and, you know, productive lives.
Wrong me, gotta treat them like family. Get your money due, we do kawishin. Me Dutch, but me it is
my language instructor, what I would say, you know, what you do for the language will do for you. So if you do good for the language is gonna provide for you in good ways. And you know, nowadays I always hear about how instructors, whether it's college, elementary, or high school, are using that song in their classrooms.
Please help me learn it, help me assist in keeping it from burning. Don't let me quit and flee from working for a worthy purpose.
I remember being a kid and being into sports, always playing football, always playing basketball, thinking like, man, I don't really know of any Native athletes. So I remember looking into it a little bit when I was in middle school, and I found out about Jim Thorpe. I'm like, this is wild, you know, he's got a gold medal. He's a NFL Hall of Famer. And you know, as I did more research now as an adult, I realized he was like the sport's first star, and he legitimized football. Yeah, as a kid, that did a lot for me.
Fell in love with the sport when I was high as knees. Then I learned to Jim Thorpe and I knew I could beast. Blow up and get the paper like them Shaka peas. Go up to snake the ball on you like massa.
With this album, I wanted to do my part in sustaining his legacy. And it just draws from the importance of youth having mentors and idols that they can relate to and connect to on a cultural and ethnic level. But it's also more personal than that, you know, because I speak in the hook a little bit about, you know, my similarities with Jim Thorpe as far as like addiction goes. Alcohol use, you know, I struggled with that, and that's something that I found out that Jim Thorpe struggled with. That was empowering to me, like, all right, you know, we relate, not just on this sports level, but also somewhat on a personal level.
Think about it, right? Like, if you grow up on the res or in the inner city as a Native kid, right? Things could be really messed up around you. And you can go in the house and turn on the TV, and you can't really see anybody who looks like you who made it. So where's the motivation? Whereas other kids that might grow up in not that great of areas and their conditions are really bad, they can go in the house and they could turn on the TV and they could look at somebody and be like, you know what? They're from where I'm from and they made it. So I know that I can do it too.
We want to see Natives on a platform where kids can look up to them, you know, not just the kids, but the communities. Growing up as a kid who cares about something, whether it's hip hop or sports, you want to see somebody who looks like you, who comes from a similar background and culture. Essentially, you know, we want to be successful and also be models of that success for other young Native MCs who come up after us, you know.
I think for me, finding success is about finding yourself and doing whatever it is that your heart tells you to do. And actually accomplishing that is success. It's not really externally, it's internally success. And I don't think we talk about that enough. Success that we have within ourselves, and when we accomplish those things, it's amazing what we could do.
I know I often write about the dark times in my life. Now it's time for me to ignite this light. Every now and then I reflect upon my past, cause everything that happened in my life.
You know, I've done some amazing things with is hip hop. And I mentioned in the TED Talk that I show up to these events wearing a t-shirt and snapback, and most people there don't know that I'm the keynote speaker. and it's just cool to be yourself and still be successful. But I think again, it's just knowing yourself and not being afraid to succeed in that thing that somebody may have made fun of you for. That to me is success, and conquering that is success.
Cause I truly believe that this light is in me, and that's why to the ones who be living in the dark. When you look up in the skies, you don't see them stars. All you see is scars. Remind you of your broken heart and question marks. Cause they always ask you who you are. They don't know you go hard. They don't know you go far. All you need is a spark. So I'ma play that part and let you know.